Some flights are delayed, some flights are cancelled, and some flights were never supposed to exist. At 12:02 a.m., Flight 207 stopped responding. Number distress call. No static, no malfunction warning, just silence. On radar, the aircraft continued smoothly at 36,000 feet, steady, controlled, almost peaceful. But inside that metal shell drifting through the clouds, something had already gone wrong. Very wrong. Air traffic control called again. Nothing. They switched frequencies. Nothing. Emergency channels. Still nothing. When fighter jets finally intercepted the aircraft, what the pilots saw would follow them for the rest of their lives. The cockpit was empty. No captain, no first officer. Yet the plane was flying perfectly. And when it landed, flawlessly, on a runway it was never cleared to use, emergency crews rushed aboard expecting chaos. What they found instead was worse. Every passenger seated, seatbelts fastened. No wounds, no blood, no signs of struggle, but every face frozen in the exact same expression. Eyes wide, mouths open, as if all 119 people had witnessed the same impossible thing at the same impossible moment. And then there was the audio recording. 2 minutes before contact was lost, the captain calmly reported something in the clouds. Something vertical. Something moving. Something that shouldn't have been there. His final words were barely audible. They're already in. After that, whispers. Not radio interference. Not engine noise. Voices. Dozens of them. Layered. Overlapping. And when technicians reversed the audio, the whispers formed a sentence. We live in the static. The FAA later claimed Flight 207 was never scheduled. Number departure clearance. No official passenger list. Decommissioned in 1997 after a fatal crash. So what landed in Portland that night? And why did 119 recovered cell phones all contain the same final image? A tall shadow standing in the aisle. Watching. Tonight, on Fear Spiral, we're diving into 3 aviation incidents that officially never happened. A flight that landed itself. A terminal that doesn't exist. And a passenger who wasn't on the manifest. But before we continue, next time you're flying through heavy clouds and you feel the plane shift slightly off course, don't stare too long into the dark outside your window. Because sometimes the clouds stare back. The flight that landed itself at 11:47 p.m., beneath a ceiling of heavy Colorado fog, Flight 2007 rolled slowly down the runway at Denver International Airport. It was supposed to be routine. A red-eye to Portland. Short haul. Light passenger load. Uneventful. The Boeing 737 lifted cleanly into the mist, swallowed by low clouds glowing faintly orange from the runway lights below. Inside the cabin, 119 passengers settled into the quiet rituals of late-night travel. Neck pillows adjusted, headphones pressed in, tray tables folded down. Nothing unusual, nothing dramatic. Just another flight disappearing into the dark. The crew, Captain Martin Rhodes, had 26 years in the sky. Thousands of flight hours. Storm cells, crosswinds, emergency drills. He had seen it all. Beside him sat First Officer Ellen Garvey, one of the airline's most promising young pilots. Calm, precise, highly respected. The ascent was smooth. At 36,000 feet, the plane leveled off. Cabin lights dimmed, the autopilot engaged. And for 41 quiet minutes, Flight 208 existed exactly as it should. Then, at 12:28 a.m., everything changed. Silence. Air traffic control issued a routine check-in. No response. They tried again. Still nothing. Not static, not distortion, not interference. Just absence. On radar, the aircraft was steady. Speed normal, altitude stable, no deviation. But the cockpit had gone dark. Controllers cycled through emergency frequencies. Nothing. The FAA was alerted. Procedures escalated. And by 12:41 a.m., 2 F-16s were airborne from an Idaho base. cutting through the night toward the silent aircraft. The intercept. When the fighter jets caught up, they approached from both sides. Captain Jansen eased closer to the cockpit window. He leaned forward, then froze. Control. I don't see anyone inside. The cockpit lights glowed faint red. Instrument panels flickered. But both pilot seats were empty. No movement, no silhouettes, no hands on the controls. The plane was flying perfectly, on its own. The fighters escorted the aircraft as it continued toward Oregon. And inside the cabin, if anyone had been there to witness it, they would have seen something far worse. The passengers, every seat occupied, every passenger upright. Seatbelts secured, hands resting on armrests, but not sleeping, not moving, eyes open, wide, unblinking, mouths frozen mid-scream, not twisted in pain, not collapsed in distress, but locked in identical terror, as though in a single shared moment they had all seen something impossible, and their bodies had simply stopped. The landing at 1:12 a.m., Flight 207 began its descent. No pilot communication. It aligned with runway 33R at Portland International Airport, a runway under construction and closed to commercial traffic. The descent rate was flawless, the flare perfect, the touchdown so smooth it barely disturbed the fog rolling across the tarmac. Emergency vehicles surrounded the aircraft within minutes. Police, Homeland Security, federal investigators, expecting a hijacking, a chemical event, a hostage crisis. The door was unlocked. No resistance, no sound. Inside it was quiet, too quiet. All 119 passengers were deceased. No visible injuries. No trauma. No oxygen deployment. Medical teams reported something they struggled to explain. The bodies were not stiff, not fully relaxed, not in any known stage of post-mortem progression. They were suspended, as though time inside the cabin had fractured. And then came the cockpit. Empty. No captain. No first officer. No signs of struggle. The autopilot was off. The control yoke centered, as if invisible hands had guided it down. The recording cockpit voice recorder told the last moments. Routine chatter, weather updates, altitude confirmations. Then, at 12:26 a.m., 2 minutes before contact was lost, Captain Rhodes spoke, seeing some movement in the clouds. Calm at first. Looks like lightning, but it's vertical. Garvey replied quietly, "That's not lightning." A pause. It has shape. Another pause. Longer. It's outside the cockpit. Breathing changed. A faint distortion. Then Rhodes again. Voice tightening. How is that possible? Then the final transmission. They're in the clouds. A beat. They're already in. After that, whispers. Layered. Dozens of overlapping voices. Not screaming. Not chanting. Just speaking. No language identifiable. Audio technicians later isolated frequencies that should not have been there. And when portions were reversed, a phrase emerged clearly, "We live in the static," long after the engines powered down. Faint pulses, soft rhythmic patterns, and beneath white noise, then silence. The erasure. Investigators uncovered something stranger. According to FAA records, Flight 207 had never been scheduled. No clearance, no official departure slot. The aircraft's tail number did not match any active fleet. Boeing confirmed the serial number once belonged to a plane decommissioned in 1997 after a fatal crash in the Rockies. Security footage at Denver showed Gate 17 empty all night. Number boarding, no crew arrival, nothing. Yet inside the aircraft were 119 cell phones. Most dead, some still powered. Every device contained the same final image in its camera roll. A tall shadow standing in the aisle, featureless, distorted, eyes reflecting static. Timestamp. 12:28 a.m., the exact second communication ceased. The aftermath, soon after. Air traffic controllers near Portland began reporting faint voices bleeding into emergency frequency 121.5. Pilots flying through storm systems over the Pacific Northwest described SUD, den chills, autopilot malfunctions, brief radar flickers. Runway 33R was sealed indefinitely. Several investigators resigned. 2 vanished. 1 left behind a note that read, "They followed it down." The aircraft was dismantled and moved to a classified storage site. Workers there reported tools disappearing, radios activating without power, and sometimes, to this day, no official explanation exists. Some believe Flight 207 entered a rare atmospheric anomaly. Some believe it crossed into restricted airspace. Others whisper about something older, something that lives in interference. And if you've ever flown at night and noticed the clouds shifting too close to the wing and felt the cabin grow strangely quiet, don't stare too long, because sometimes the sky stares back. Terminal 6 doesn't exist. There are places in airports you're not meant to see, maintenance corridors, unmarked stairwells, doors that require badges you don't have. But sometimes, the airport shows you something that isn't supposed to be there at all, and it waits to see if you'll follow. Jason Wells was not the kind of man who believed in urban legends. He was practical, analytical, a technology consultant who spent more time in terminals than in his own apartment. Airports were systems, patterns, predictable flows of human movement. And few airports were more familiar to him than O'Hare International Airport. He knew every coffee stand, every charging station, every gate cluster. So when he landed on a cold November evening with a 3-hour layover, he felt completely at home. Terminal 3. Gate K15. Normal, busy, alive. The usual airport symphony. Rolling luggage, distant boarding calls, overlapping conversations. That's when he saw the sign. The sign it hung from the ceiling like any other overhead direction board. Black background, white lettering, arrows pointing toward baggage claim, Terminal 5. And beneath that, Terminal 6. Jason slowed. Terminal 6? He frowned. He'd never heard of one. He glanced at a nearby janitor. "Excuse me, when did they add Terminal 6? The woman blinked at him. "There is no Terminal 6. He looked back up. The sign was still there. Terminal 6. Gate 6A, 6E. Clear as day. No flicker, no distortion. Just wrong. Curiosity overpowered logic, and he followed the arrow. The walk. At first nothing changed. The floor gleamed under fluorescent lights. Passengers hurried past. Announcements echoed overhead. Then gradually, the noise thinned. Conversations faded. Foot traffic slowed. The hum of the crowd drained away like water slipping down a sink. Jason didn't notice when the tile beneath his shoes changed. From polished stone to worn linoleum. The lighting shifted slightly. Still bright but colder. He passed advertisement boards, but they weren't for brands he recognized. The airline logos were unfamiliar. Japan Central, Monarch Skyways, Vistalux Air. Destinations listed: Yugoslavia, Prussia, Bombay, names that hadn't existed in decades. A low vibration pressed into his ears. Not sound exactly, more like pressure. A pulse. He checked his phone. No signal. That had never happened at O'Hare. Not once. Then he saw it. Gate 6C. The hallway stretched longer than it should have, subtly curved, as if space itself had bent. At the end stood a gate podium. Above it, 6C, parked beyond the glass, sat an aircraft, jet black. No markings, no airline insignia, no tail number. Larger than most commercial planes. Few windows, too smooth, like it had been carved from shadow. Standing beside the gate was a woman. Gray uniform, outdated cut, fabric dull and slightly wrinkled. Her skin was pale, not naturally pale, but colorless. Her eyes were large, too reflective. Her smile didn't reach them. When she spoke, Her lips barely moved. Final boarding call for the forgotten. The words did not echo in the terminal. They echoed inside him. Jason swallowed. I think I'm lost. Her head tilted slightly. Boarding closes in 2 minutes. He hadn't moved forward, but suddenly he was only a few steps from her. He stepped back. The hallway behind him seemed longer now. The lights flickered once, then steadied. Sir, she said softly. They're waiting. The run, Jason turned and ran. The corridor stretched, extended, warped. The walls curved inward slightly. Like something breathing, the vibration in his ears grew stronger. The lights dimmed, brightened, dimmed again. He sprinted harder. His reflection flashed in darkened glass panels. Except once, it wasn't his reflection. For half a second, he saw himself walking calmly toward Gate 6C. Smiling, he burst through swinging double doors and collided back into the chaos of Terminal 3. Crowds, normality. He turned. The hallway was gone. In its place, a maintenance closet, janitor sign taped to the door. Denial? He approached airport security. Is there a Terminal 6? The guard chuckled. Nope, never has been. I just walked there. You sure you didn't hit the bar too early? Jason forced a laugh, returned to his gate, boarded his connecting flight, said nothing. But something had shifted. Something followed. The research back home in Portland, sleep didn't come easily. He searched aviation blueprints, archived airport layouts. Nothing. No Terminal 6, no Gate 6C. Then, buried in an obscure online forum, he found a scanned newspaper clipping from 1963, a black and white photograph, a group of passengers standing beside a sleek, dark aircraft. Caption: O'Hare opens experimental Gate 6C for Monarch Skyway's departure. Jason's hands went cold. He recognized the faces. The man in the bowler hat, the little girl in the polka dot dress, the woman with cracked glasses. People he had passed in that hallway, unaged, unchanged. The article mentioned something else. The flight had never arrived at its destination. It had vanished over Lake Michigan. No debris found, no distress signal. Officially classified as mechanical failure. Unofficially, forgotten. The bleed-through. That night, Jason reviewed footage from his home security camera. At 2:17 a.m., a flicker appeared at the end of his driveway. A silhouette, still, tall. The image distorted briefly into static, then returned to normal. The next night, the figure stood closer, near the porch. The third night, at his window. Gray uniform, pale face, smiling. Final boarding call. Stopped leaving the house after dark. Every time he closed his eyes, he walked the hallway again. The advertisements older. The lights dimmer. The black plane closer. And now, passengers stood in line at the gate. Silent, motionless, waiting. Some turned their heads slowly when he passed. Eyes empty. Recognition in their gaze, as if they knew he had been offered a seat. The disappearance. Jason missed work, then stopped responding entirely. His apartment was found unlocked. Lights on. Laptop open. Browser history filled with searches. Terminal 6 O'Hare missing flight. Monarch Skyway's 1963. How to refuse boarding. A boarding pass. Monarch Skyway's. Flight 207. Seat 6C. Departure time. 12:28 a.m. No arrival listed. Authorities ruled it a mental health episode. Stress-induced hallucination. Case closed. But airport employees at O'Hare have quietly reported something else. Very late at night, when foot traffic drops, when announcements thin out, some claim they've seen a hallway that shouldn't exist. Lights colder than the rest. Air heavier. And a sign that flickers briefly. Terminal 6. Most look away. Most don't follow. Because deep down, airports are transitional spaces, thresholds. And some thresholds don't lead where they're supposed to. And if you ever find yourself wandering alone during a long layover, and you see a sign pointing somewhere unfamiliar, somewhere unlisted, don't follow it. Because once you reach gate 6C, you might not come back through the same door. The passenger who wasn't on the manifest. Some disappearances happen in remote forests. Some vanish in deep oceans. But the most disturbing ones happen in sealed cabins. 30,000 feet in the air, nowhere to run, nowhere to hide, and no logical way out. It was supposed to be routine. Alpine Air Flight 4321, departing from Seattle-Tacoma International Airport. Destination: Boise. Clear weather. Short flight. 72 passengers. Mostly business travelers, weekend commuters. Nothing remarkable until seat 23A. The man in 23A. Flight attendant Sarah Jensen noticed him during final cabin checks. Tall, long dark trench coat, wide-brimmed hat pulled low, hands resting perfectly parallel on his knees. Too still. Not nervous, not tired. Just fixed. When she greeted the row, he didn't respond, didn't blink, didn't acknowledge her presence. His posture never shifted. A cold ripple ran through her. Not fear exactly, just wrongness. The plane took off smoothly, seatbelt signs off. Service began. Passengers relaxed. But when Sarah returned to row 23, the woman assigned to 23B had moved 3 rows ahead. "Is everything okay?" Sarah asked gently. The woman hesitated. "That man, he didn't say anything. He didn't even look at me. I just couldn't sit next to him." Sarah nodded professionally, but something tightened in her chest. She checked her tablet. Passenger manifest, 23B. Miriam Collins, 23A. Blank. She refreshed the system. Still blank. The vanishing Sarah informed the cockpit. The captain brushed it off. Probably a booking glitch. First Officer Trevor Voss volunteered to take a look. He walked calmly down the aisle. Passengers watched. A subtle tension spreading. He stopped at row 23 and froze. The seat was empty. "Where is he?" Sarah whispered. "He's not here." Miriam turned from 3 rows ahead. He was there. I swear. They checked lavatories, galley, storage compartments, every inch of the aircraft. The cockpit door had remained locked since departure. No one had entered. No one had exited. The plane was sealed. 72 names on the manifest. 72 bodies accounted for. Except no one could account for 23A. The turbulence. 45 minutes into the flight, without warning, the aircraft dropped. Violent turbulence. Sudden. Brutal. Overhead bins rattled. Passengers screamed. The nose dipped sharply enough to trigger warning alarms. Oxygen masks nearly deployed. Then, stillness. Too still. The shaking stopped instantly, as if cut off. The cabin lights flickered, then went dark. Emergency lighting glowed faint red. For 10 long seconds, silence. Then the lights returned, and every passenger was asleep. Heads tilted, eyes closed, breathing steady, like synchronized mannequins. Except Sarah. She stood in the aisle, heart hammering, looking around in disbelief. Miriam, row 23 was empty. 23A, 23B, both vacant. Miriam's purse hung on the armrest. Her coat remained in the overhead bin. Boarding pass still tucked in the seat pocket. But she was gone. No exit. Sarah shook passengers awake. One by one they stirred, confused, disoriented. No one had seen Miriam move. No one saw anyone walk the aisle. The cockpit confirmed. No doors opened. No altitude change. No cabin pressure alerts. The aircraft never deviated from course. Upon landing in Boise, security met the plane. Every passenger questioned. Every bag searched. Surveillance footage reviewed. No Miriam Collins exited the aircraft. Official status, an impossibility. The recording, during standard post-flight review, technicians examined the cockpit voice recorder. Most of it was ordinary. engine noise, turbulence, crew communication. But beneath the turbulence audio, they heard something else, a whisper, layered beneath wind and structural creaks. They isolated the frequency, amplified it, and froze. It wasn't random noise. It was a sentence, soft, close, intimate. She sat in my seat, nor any passenger voice on record. It sounded older, deeper, like fabric dragging across gravel. The aircraft was quietly removed from service, placed in long-term storage at a Nevada hangar. But the reports followed. Technicians claimed they saw a figure seated in the last row during inspections, tall, hat brim low. When approached, gone. One mechanic filed a final entry in his maintenance log. He wants her back. He resigned the next day. Aftermath. Sarah quit flying, moved to a small town in Montana, tried to bury the memory. But on cold nights, when wind pressed against the windows, she sometimes heard 3 soft knocks at her door. Always 3. She never opened it. Once, she found something beneath the frame. A folded boarding pass, weathered, uncreased. Miriam Collins. Flight 4321. Seat 23B. Departure. 6:45 p.m. arrival. Blank. Patterns. 3 flights. 3 anomalies. Flight 207. Gate 6C. Seat 23A. Each incident linked by one detail. 12:28 a.m. The moment communications cease. The moment the hallway appears. The moment the cabin goes silent. A timestamp recurring like a pulse in static. Investigators who cross-referenced data noticed something chilling. On each aircraft audio file, right before silence, there is a frequency spike at 12.28 kilohertz. Too precise to ignore, too consistent to dismiss. And beneath it, whispers. Always whispers. Maybe these are isolated incidents. Atmospheric phenomena. Psychological stress, faulty equipment, or maybe there are places between departure and arrival, between terminals, between seats, places not listed on manifests, places not printed on airport maps, thresholds, and sometimes something boards with you. It doesn't need a ticket, it doesn't need a name, it just waits until turbulence, until fog, until the hallway appears. And when it calls quietly. From static, from clouds, from the empty seat beside you. So next time you fly at night, and the cabin lights dim, and the clouds press too close to your window, if you feel someone sitting beside you, don't look immediately. Don't react, because if you acknowledge it, you may have just confirmed your reservation. Airports were designed to move people from one place to another, from departure to arrival, from present to future. They are built on precision, timing, and control. Schedules, manifests, clearances. But tonight, we explored something different. A flight that landed without pilots, a terminal that doesn't exist, a passenger who was never on the manifest. 3 separate events, 3 sealed environments. 3 moments where reality didn't break. It simply shifted. And in each case, the most disturbing detail wasn't the disappearance. It wasn't the whispers. It wasn't even the empty cockpit. It was how perfectly everything else continued. The aircraft flew smoothly. The hallway blended seamlessly. The passengers slept peacefully, as if whatever happened was meant to happen. That's what makes these stories linger. Not chaos, not destruction, but precision, something intelligent, something that doesn't rush, something that waits for fog, for turbulence, for long layovers. Airports are transitional spaces, thresholds suspended between destinations, and thresholds have always carried weight in human history. Doorways, bridges, crossroads, places where one step forward changes everything. Maybe Flight 207 crossed something. Maybe Gate 6C opens only when you notice it. Maybe Seat 23A is never really empty. Or maybe these are warnings, subtle reminders that even in the most controlled systems we've built, There are variables we don't understand. Signals inside static, shapes inside clouds, voices inside turbulence. And if you ever find yourself flying through a storm at night, and the wingtip lights flicker just a little too long, or your screen loses signal at exactly 12:28 a.m., or the passenger beside you doesn't blink, just remember, not every journey is meant to arrive. Some are meant to disappear quietly between frequencies. If this story unsettled you, if it made you glance at the empty seat beside you, or rethink your next red-eye flight, then you've officially stepped into the spiral. And once you enter, you start noticing things, small details, odd timing, subtle shifts that others ignore. Before you go, tell me in the comments which one disturbed you the most. Flight 207, Terminal 6, or Seat 23A. And if you've ever experienced something strange while traveling, I want to hear it, because the spiral grows with every story. This is Fear Spiral, where ordinary places twist quietly into the unknown. Subscribe if you're ready for the next descent. And until our paths cross again, safe travels. And don't look too long into the clouds. They might be looking back.